At this time, I would like to call the special board workshop to order. Clerk of the board, please call the roll.
Arancibia,
Present.
Hall,
Present.
Segura,
Here.
Solis,
Present.
Tarantino,
Here.
Aguirre,
Here.
Adamos.
Here.
Thank you. We will now hold a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice President Arturo Solis.
Put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Per Government Code Section 54954.3, this is the point on the agenda where members of the public may address the board on the item that has been described in the notice for the board workshop before or during consideration of that item. Speakers shall refrain from using profanity and shall speak in a respectful manner. Thank you for your cooperation.
Yes, we have 3 speakers, Mr. President. The first speaker is Michael Gray.
Hi, my name is Michael Gray, and I'm the band and guitar teacher at Montgomery High and Montgomery Middle School, and also the PLC chair for our Sweetwater Union band director group. And I remember well, March 13th, 2020, it was a Friday the 13th. It was the day that my band was scheduled to perform at the music festival at Chula Vista High, along with lots of other high schools and middle school bands and orchestras. But sadly, we never made it to that performance, and little did we know that 13 months later, we would still be waiting for our next performance. You know, across the district, we've seen our band enrollment drop. In some instances, bands have been reduced to a third of their previous size, and our music programs have taken a major hit over the past 13 months. If we don't act now to mitigate the loss of learning, we're at risk of losing some of our great music programs and the exceptional support that they provide our students. Our music classes are where many students find themselves. They may not feel like they belong anywhere else, but you put a trumpet in their hands and they come alive. And that's part of the amazing work found in our music and our BAPA classes. Not only are the students learning how to play their instrument, but they're also gaining social emotional support, not to mention leadership training, all of that, super important. But right now, the music classes and the music students really need your help. And few subjects have been impacted as much as music. You know, let's take a small band of 22 students. Prior to COVID, we were rehearsing 295 minutes per week. Post-COVID, that number was reduced to 80 minutes per week. That's 215 minutes of rehearsal lost every week, meaning that over the course of the school year, each student lost over 7,000 minutes of instructional rehearsal time, or 170,000 minutes overall as a band. And if you take a band of 96 students, they'll have experienced a loss of 1.2 million minutes of instructional time just this year. And those are crucial minutes that we can't get back. So we know we have only a small window of time to impact these students. And for many students, music, the arts, it's what keeps them engaged. You know, I've seen it at my school. Students who were previously passionate about being at school, loved being a part of the band, have had kind of the life sucked out of them because they no longer get to experience that joy of playing their instruments, being with their friends, and being in that community. So as we return to in-person instruction, you know, the arts are going to be that much more important. As students get reinvested in school, students have missed out on so much of the community aspect of life, with the arts being a huge aspect of that. So we want to see equity being built across our district, you know, supporting lower income families and students by providing that necessary equipment that they need for that success, from reeds and cleaning supplies to quality instruments as well. And we need to ensure that every student has their own instrument, not just one tuba being shared by 3 different students in 3 different classes. Many of our programs don't have adequate large percussion instruments as well, you know, forcing students to alternate or sit out altogether. So some of our bands even are rehearsing building and using old equipment like folding metal chairs from the 1970s that still say junior high on them. You know, so we really need to invest in our music programs, both equipment and personnel. So in conclusion, our music PLC has been meeting together. We plan to submit a mitigation plan to Mr. Cover in the near future with suggestions such as future COVID precautions, equitable access for students, measures for recruitment and retention, learning loss mitigation, and equipping facilities to recognize that new reality that we find ourselves in. So as we determine the greatest areas of needs and biggest impacts with these special funds, please do remember the arts. I dare say for many of us, music is what helped get us through the last 13 months. So let's keep building that support for our future students as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Kathleen Cheers.
Yes, good afternoon. I'd like to begin by saying that the live feed on YouTube is not up. Good evening. I'd like to review the information that was attached to the board agenda. Page 3, bullet point 1. Focus on accelerated student learning, prioritizing health, safety, social, emotional learning. I did not see student education learning loss addressed. Page 4, bullet point 2. In-person instructional support. Please define instructional support. Bullet point 4. Identifies professional development, yet student development is overlooked as priority. Why? Bullet point 9. Maintain operations and continuity of services. Is this an indication that without these educational dollars, our students would have stopped and our education would have stopped due to the pre-COVID multi-million-dollar deficit? Page 6, bullet point 4. Allowable activities, salaries. Is this a precursor to future salary increases? Page 7, bullet point 2. Extending instructional learning. Time is a parameter of the grant, yet it is not listed as a priority under the priorities on page 4. Page 8, bullet point 2. How was the parent community contacted in an effort to develop this plan? In reviewing page 14, I see school side council representatives were omitted. This needs to be brought to the state and federal officials' attention. Bullet point 2, you indicate high-speed internet. Why is it we currently still have students that have no internet access in some of our lowest economic areas? Page 10 and 12, bullet points 2 and 3. How much money will each individual principal receive? When and where specifically can the community find the information? On the second attachment, you indicate $500,000 for tutoring. Have any of you trustees prepared to ask why the disparity between student needs versus tutoring and the millions in staff development? Allow me to end by challenging this workshop being held at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, which as many sarcastically refer to as typical Sweetwater. Follow up by Mr. Aaron Sibia. Surely you do not assign your students with in-depth material and then give a mere day to study the material and respond in a quantitative or qualitative manner. This meeting simply allows you to check a box. In truth, our trustees do not do the work required. They simply vote, historically 5-0. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mrs. Cheers, you may need to refresh your screen because the live feed is working. The next speaker is Nick Marinovich.
Good afternoon. This is the NCAD Nick Marinovich. I'd like to start out on actually a positive note that at least finally you got to, in a concise report, at least some of the issues policy-wise you should have addressed long ago. However, I just have to sit here on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock and say, what are we doing here at 4 o'clock on a Friday on something that is so important? This is unbelievable. You know, we've already had roughly $40-some million already with the CARES Act. It's already been dealt with earlier through spending or through allocation. And this should have been done a long time ago, what's before you today, on a Friday afternoon, again at 4 o'clock. You know, over the last year, there's an article in the Voice of San Diego about where did we send the money we got from the federal government. And disproportionately, extremely much higher percentage went to what was called redirected personnel costs. Yet the issue of where to spend that initial money never really had this kind of attention that it's getting today that we needed a year ago. So where were you, district? You know, this is just not the way good governance is supposed to happen. The real process should be to get your priorities established early through a collaborative process that's transparent and where everybody discusses it. You set your priorities, then you do your funding, and then you establish your budget. You know, this is being done it's just being done not in a normal good governance process. A couple of the specific things, and you know, I hate to always be seen like complaining, but it just doesn't seem like Sweetwater can learn how to do it the way it should be done. A couple of specific comments. One, I noticed there was $14 million in HVAC and the roof replacement cost. My God, that is like bond money should go to that kind of thing. Where does the bond money go? It goes instead to an aquatic center, $25-some million with all the ancillary. You know, sooner or later, eventually, this district is going to get it the correct way to do collaborative strategic planning with the community. 4 o'clock on a Friday is not the way to do it. At least you've got the information finally in front of you. What we really need here is what we really haven't had and how to deal with this issue is leadership over the last 12 months. It requires a leader to set the priorities or establish options for those priorities before the board, have it discussed, establish those priorities, and then do the spending plan. You know, I just don't see that normal process in front of you up until today. So, again, I hope there's a lessons learned from this whole process. I want to compliment the staff that did finally put this information together before you. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Thank you. We'll move to C1, budget priorities related to one-time funds.
Thank you, President Segura. So at this point, we will go ahead and move forward on the presentation. And when we get to the appropriate time, I'll ask Dr. Salkeld to bring the spreadsheet, corresponding spreadsheet, to go through the individual items. Let me go ahead and bring that up so that we can all have access to it. And since I cannot see the individuals on the camera, if you can let me know if you are able to see the PowerPoint.
Yes, sir, it's there.
Thank you. Okay. So first of all, thank you, trustees and members of the public. We are bringing forward this budget development workshop this afternoon to address the state and federal one-time funding. As we know, there's a number of different resources that have become available to the district, and we wanted to make sure that we were transparent. At this time, there is no vote that is being requested. Rather, it's us having the conversation around priorities, and then from there, we'll further inform our process, and there will be future adjustments. So I just want to make sure there's a clarity of understanding that today's budget development workshop is about our district being transparent, offering this information in a way that's clear in order to further make adjustments as we move forward in preparation for the new fiscal year. So we still have time ahead of that. And I think it's important to identify the rationale for this workshop, which is really to have this conversation in a way that's transparent and public, and we can have questions about where we are. Some of the information that we will be covering is actually pretty straightforward from the California Department of Education. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So the slides for this afternoon consist of the following, and we will review our strategic objectives as currently drafted, again in draft form, identify the priorities that will allow us to arrive at those strategic objectives, include a conversation or a description of the different sources of funding, such as the CARES Act of 2020, which included different sources of funding, such as ESSER 1, State In-Person Instruction Grant, and the State Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant. That's the AB 86 funding sources, followed by a slide regarding federal elementary and secondary school relief, the ESSER funds, the second and third tranche of that funding. There will be a funding summary that is a table that in essence compiles the different sources of revenues into one table that's kind of a one-stop shop, easy to see slide. From there, we will describe our approach for stakeholder engagement. This is part of that process, but this is not the finality of that process. We are going through that process as we speak. We will then provide a screenshot of the spreadsheet, include it with some guiding questions for input and inquiry, and finally bringing to conclusion. So that's the plan for this afternoon. So in terms of the strategic objectives, these are the 5 items that we as staff have identified. We are seeking to leverage one-time state and federal funding to focus on accelerating student learning in a manner that prioritizes health and safety as well as social and emotional learning for the return to learn of all of our students and all of our staff. Secondly, focus on preparedness during uncertain COVID-19 landscape. As we learned over the past year, there were many shifts, sometimes abrupt, in terms of guidance that we received from the state or the county, and so we want to focus on preparedness. Thirdly, we want to focus on an effort to mitigate negative impacts of COVID-19. This includes services and actions such as investing in COVID-19 testing, monitoring efforts, technology, as well as some facility efforts. Fourthly, planning for 2021-2022 reopening in person, so long as it follows the health and safety guidelines adopted by both the state and county. So I just want to make sure I pause there because it's worthwhile to highlight that we are planning to reopen the 2021-22 school year in person 5 days a week. That is our current planning, and we're working toward that end. And that goes to our next point of strategic objective, also providing alternatives for students who wish to remain in a virtual learning environment. For example, this year we initiated the Launch Academy. So that is going to be an alternative available for students who wish to remain in a virtual setting, as well as having our traditional independent study program, as well as options secondary school. So this is our approach and how we organize our objectives in order to move forward, again, in an environment where we are in the recovery phase of COVID-19, understanding that there is still community spread, but there are now mitigation efforts to allow us to move forward. So how do we make progress toward those objectives? It is through these priorities, such as social emotional supports. We all understand that all of our students and our staff experienced COVID-19 in a different way, and we want to make sure we're prepared to welcome everybody back upon the return to learn. We also, our priority is in-person instructional support along the lines of more academic supports. Summer and intersession learning opportunities to ensure that we're accelerating that learning that may not have necessarily been there during the COVID-19 pandemic, focusing on professional development and training opportunities, as well as mental health services for our students, COVID-19 preparedness, coordination, as well as some limited facilities improvements and considerations, looking to augment our instructional materials as we're looking to accelerate learning. Also operational supports in areas such as nutrition services, transportation, and maintenance that have all been impacted during this COVID-19 pandemic, as well as maintaining operations and continuity of services. And I want to highlight the fact that that is the language from the California Department of Education, in case there's any type of confusion. That is a priority identified for these allowable services according to the CDE. Next is support for site discretionary needs. Again, this is with COVID-19 in mind, and we will review some of those methodologies in a future point. And lastly, our technology needs. As we all broke for distance learning, we learned how much we all depend on devices and connectivity. So that is something that is foremost in our thinking as we think about those priorities, that are those technology needs, as devices and connectivity are concerned. So the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act of 2020. In this area, as you can see, it's made up of various funds and resources, both from the state and federal government. There were $8.2 million directly allocated from the federal government. GEAR, which is a governor's response fund, is $2.4 million. The state general fund included $3.4 million, as well as the Coronavirus Relief Fund, the CRF, that included $26.5 million. Added together, this gives us the sum of $40.5 million. Again, this is a substantial amount. In terms of how we outlined where those priorities for investments would be, if you look at the 2020 and 21 Learning Continuity Plan, which was brought forth in a public meeting for board consideration, public review, and adoption during the fall, that outlined the areas of priority and focus for us to address what was at that time kind of in the midst of the pandemic. It also called for stakeholder engagement, which occurred in various methods and locations, including parents, students, teachers, and staff. The next resource regarding pandemic, addressing the needs during the pandemic, are what we refer to as State In-Person Instruction Grant, the AB 86 grant. The amount here is estimated at approximately $12 million. It expires on August 31st of 2022, so we have a little bit over a year to invest in this area. Now, here are some parameters in terms of what this grant covers. For example, it identified specific students for purposes of priority. So if you note, these are the students who were invited back on a priority basis once our campuses reopened on April 12th. There is no application required, which is different than some of the other funds. And another parameter is that we must offer in-person instruction by May 15th. Otherwise, there's a possible reduction in the amount of 1% per day, which we believe we have met, and we're in that process of verification. Allowable activities include, as you can see, COVID-19 testing, cleaning and disinfection, PPE, ventilation, and other school site upgrades for health and safety, salaries for certificate or classified employees providing in-person instruction or services, and social and mental health support services. So again, the focus here has been to incentivize the return of students back to our campuses. And so to that effect, that was what this funding, how we utilized this funding to ensure that we were able to move forward in a way that would allow us to serve the students identified under AB 86 and have these resources to ensure we were providing services and supports to our students. And obviously how we do that is through our staff to a large degree. So I think that's just a factual statement. Next. We will go to, I believe, the next slide, slide 7. Here we see a description of the State Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant, the ELO. This grant is in an amount of a little over $27 million. It also expires at the end of August of 2022. And here the parameters include supplemental instruction, support for social emotional well-being, and also it speaks to the meal program by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which our district does participate in. It also, an additional parameter is extending instructional learning time, accelerating progress to close learning gaps, integrated pupil supports, community learning hubs, supports for credit deficient pupils, additional academic services. And so you could see the rest of those services that are allowable. There are some fiscal requirements of this grant, such as the fact that 85% of the grant must be used for in-person services, And 10% of these funds must be established for paraprofessionals, and that is as a function of the legislation itself. That is not a point of local discretion. It is actually a directive from the state. And we may use up to 15% for distance learning. So as you can see, there's it's been sourced at the bottom of the slide. If anybody would like to review that guidance from the California Department of Education, it is available on their website. Continuing with the parameters of the State Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant, we also we will be developing an Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant plan that needs to be submitted to the county, to the state through the county. Again, this needs to provide a description of how parents, teachers, and other stakeholders are involved in the process. And the key here is that, again, it's still under development. It's not final. We wanted to come to the board for a workshop so that we can have this conversation prior to moving forward with that grant. Allowable services, again, it's similar as the previous slide, and there's a sourcing at the bottom so that anybody who would like to see the direct source on the website for CDE can access that. On slide 9, we move on to federal ESSER 2 and 3 funding. So under ESSER 2, the district will receive approximately $34 million. Under ESSER 3, the district is scheduled to receive a little over $76 million. These funds expire on September 30th, 2023, with a note that ESSER 3, that obligation may be go through September of 2024. That typically is for items related to facilities improvements, but it could also incur other areas. And so the parameters for ESSER fundings 2 and 3 is the district does need to apply. These allocations will be made on a Title I allocation methodology. Something that I think there's been some confusion about in the public is regarding requirement for supplementing versus supplanting. Again, as indicated in the CDE's website, there is no such requirement. However, the state does have a requirement to maintain support for educational funding. So that was an important point to point out. Continuing on slide 10 with allowable expenses for ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, you can see that this first bullet point includes the coordination and preparedness of response to public health departments. As part of COVID, our district has been submitting regular reports to our public health department here in the County of San Diego. And so as part of, as well as the San Diego County Office of Education and other agencies. So as part of that, we have the ability to use these funds to support this coordination and preparedness efforts. We may provide principals and other school leaders with resources necessary to address needs of individual schools. We have the ability to fund activities to address the unique needs of low-income children or students, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and foster care youth, including how outreach and service delivery will meet the needs of each population. And the last bullet on the slide, developing and implementing procedures and systems to improve the preparedness and response efforts of LEAs, which are in essence school districts. On slide 11, we can see that it allows for planning and coordination on long-term closures in case this were to be the case. Our district does not anticipate this to be the case. However, as you will see further along, part of our strategy at planning and coordinating is ensuring we make investments in technology to support our planning and coordination efforts. Again, we don't anticipate further long-term closures, and as we are in the process of planning, return to in-person instruction for next school year. Staff training, professional development on sanitation and minimizing the spread of infection disease, purchasing supplies to sanitize and clean the facilities, as well as other educational technology. So again, these are allowable expenses. I know there's been a lot of question about what is not, so we wanted to make sure we sourced this information from the CDE's website. On slide 12, this list continues. You can see some of the additional supports such as mental health, Summer learning and supplemental after-school programs is going to be an area of investment we will focus on or proposing to focus on, as well as discretionary funds for school principals or other activities necessary to maintain the operation and continuity of services and LEAs, to continuing the employment of their existing staff. Again, there's questions. I just want to make sure there's a clarity there that this is based on the ESSER frequently asked questions provided by the California Department of Education. On slide 13, we can see a funding summary that in essence compiles the different funding sources by amounts and provides a timeline. So you can see there's CARES Act and the amount is 40.5 million. The state in-person grant, the AB 86, that's 12 million estimated. That is still being calculated based on the fact we open on April 12th. So we missed since the April 5th to April 12th window. State Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant, the AB 86, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. At this time, I would like to ask Dr. Sawkill if she can provide comment on what are some of those timelines that we're looking at for CARES Act, including ESSER 1 and GEAR, et cetera. Dr. Sawkill.
Gary, switch over.
It's just on the timelines, if you will.
So on the timelines, as Dr. Gary mentioned, we are working very closely with those. It is a multi-year approach, and so as we share in a little bit the schedule, we'll go through those specific details. There are some reporting requirements similar to what we did with CARES Act. We will continue to work with the county and the California Department of Education to pull that information together.
Thank you, Dr. Sawkill. Headed back to the presentation. Okay. One thing I did want to do as just to kind of provide an example is go to a website so that it could be real evident kind of how the website looks over at the CDE and the fact that this is the guidance. So if you give me a second, I will. So here we have the CDE's website that has a frequently asked question site regarding ESSER. So as you can see, this is the information that was alluded to earlier, such as CDE's post-preliminary allocations. Do any supplement or supplant requirements apply to ESSER funds? What are the allowable uses of ESSER funds? Again, we have gone through those. I just wanted to make sure that for anybody who wanted to have access to that, they can go directly to the CDE's website. And as you can see, these are the points that were covered under those slides. And now we return to the PowerPoint presentation. If this were to allow me to go to the... Okay. So we resume on slide 13. Again, that was that funding summary, and it includes the timeline discussion that Dr. Sawkill included. And we are now at the stakeholder engagement. So part of our stakeholder engagement is ensuring that we're reaching out to the different and varied set of stakeholders that we have. So we have already engaged a dialogue with our newly formed student advisory group, our student advisory committee, where they shared with us their distinct interest in the area of ethnic studies. That was something that was very clearly articulated to the district staff that met with the student advisory committee, and that aligns with some of the investments we are identifying, again, in the area of ethnic studies. Parents, we will be reaching out to DLAC and DPAC. Our teaching staff, we have had a preliminary meeting with SEA. Other school staff, we have had preliminary meetings with CSEA, our classified employees, SCGA, our counselors, NAGE, our supervisorial, and our confidential staff. So again, in an effort to have those dialogues and those conversations. We have also met with management And we will also be engaging at the school site level to receive feedback, as well as conducting a district-wide level survey. And so as we get into the crux of the conversation, we wanted to share some kind of guiding questions for you to have in mind as we go through the spreadsheets and the allocation recommendations or the suggested plans. So, and these guiding questions are there strengths here? Are there items that we should consider increasing or adjusting? Are there areas of need that either are in the plan and need increased funding, or are not in the plan that should be included? Are there general wonderings and questions for our consideration, as well as any points of additional input? And so with that, I'll ask Dr. Salkeld to bring up the funding spreadsheet. So Dr. Salkeld.
Everyone see the data?
Yes. So the way that this has been organized is it's been organized according to resource, so that it would allow us to follow along the timelines that we discussed earlier. So as you can see, this first column indicates the state in-person instruction grant. This is the Return to Learn grant that the state offered in order to incentivize a return for us to have the ability to have students on our campuses. So that's that first resource. The second resource, color-coded in yellow, is the State Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant. And this is, again, for us to be able to address some of the need to accelerate learning and address some of the challenges that students faced over the course of the last year with the pandemic. The next, so these two columns are state resources. Federal ESSER 2, the third column in a light green color. This is the federal ESSER funding, which has a longer timeline of September of 2023. And lastly, we have the ESSER 3 funding, which again is a federal resource and goes through September of 2024. And Dr. Salkeld, can you speak to the fact that when do we anticipate having these resources actually arriving at the district, and some of the knowns items that are out there and some of the unknowns regarding the different resources that are going to be there?
Thank you, Dr. Aguirre, and good evening, board trustees, cabinet, and community members. So in response to the timing of when the district will receive the monies, because we have received the allocations, the CDE has provided these preliminary numbers or these awards that you see here that on the presentation, as well as the schedule. In regards to the cash coming into the county treasury account, these state monies, the plan is to have the CDE and the state controller's office will release 50% of these amounts here next month. We don't have a specific timing as to when that will arrive, but we just have that it will be released in May. And then the balance of that will be in August. And so in this case here, where there is that adjustment of 1% per day, that would be reflected at that point in time. As it relates to the federal funding, we also have not received these dollars. This $34 million was part of the stimulus that was initiated in December. And then this most recent $76 million, which is part of the American Rescue Plan. Both of these amounts, we do not know when those monies will be received. I did inquire with the County Office of Education this morning regarding ESSER 3 because we have not been assigned the specific resource number for that, and also the timing of when we would record this, if it would be included in the third interim. There is still work at the federal level, is what the County Office relayed to me, that the U.S. Department of Education is putting together the specifics regarding this funding and also the resource. So at this point, we do not have timing on the federal.
Thank you, Dr. Salkeld. I think that's the important piece, to make sure that there's some of this arrival of these resources is actually unknown at this time, but we are moving forward with engaging our stakeholders, putting out a draft plan to go through the cycles and the iterations to improve this planning. Okay, so we now get into our plan process. Again, we are currently planning on a approximately $12 million for this grant. As you can see, the return to learn incentive was approximately 1.8 million. And really the goal there was to incentivize the return for students to come back, to be able to have students come back to our classrooms and to our schools, which has occurred to a large extent. It also was done in a way that was safe, observing the social distancing and all the other protocols that we had to develop. The next item is in-person staffing supports. This is part of a negotiated MOU, so that is funding that has been identified, as well as the following resource, which is counseling professional development. That was part of an MOU with our school and counseling unit. So that was something that was negotiated. And this is, again, to bring some professional development as we're prepared to bring students back onto our campuses. The following row is $4 million. And with these substantial influx of resources, one of the things that we understand we will have to do is have some planning time and or training time in order for us to be able to, there's going to be a lot of activity going on. And so that will be part of the need, is to have that planning and training. So that is subject to bargaining, but I wanted to make sure that that is the rationale for this, because there will be a substantial aspect to either planning or training. That is followed by expanded summer school and accelerated program. Out of this grant, we're identifying $2 million, but I want to make sure that we share the bigger strategy, which is to ensure that we're offering summer school over this summer and next summer at the least, and looking into a possibility third year. But really, it's about making sure we have those opportunities for students to accelerate their learning, to recover credits, to address some of those no credit pandemic grades that are out there. So we have a limited amount of time, and we want to make sure we use this funding to support our students in that way. So summer school and accelerated program is going to be a key part of our strategy. Next, the next row, you will see 1.5 million for credit recovery. We are in the planning process to offer fall, winter, and spring intersessions. As you recall, we have a unique school year calendar, and so we do have a fall break as well as a winter break and spring break. So at each of the breaks, we're making plans to ensure that we offer intersession for purposes of credit recovery. Again, understanding that different students are at different place along that process. LPAC testing support. This is for English learners. And the last item on this row is the Kids on the Go for employee childcare. Again, given that a number of elementary school districts are closed at this time, in order to facilitate the ability to be able to have our staff back on sites, this allowed us to have a larger number of students back on campuses by ensuring that our educators had the ability to be in their classrooms. So that is the employee childcare. Other considerations that we will be taking into account are the subrate increase for April through July to address the COVID environment or pandemic. Same thing for Intersession, as well as other classified staffing. These are areas we will be considering further, be wanting to note them as in essence placeholders. Again, understanding that this plan is not final at this time, but it's something that we want to make sure we address. So then we move to the next resource, the Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant. Here it's approximately, you can see it's $24.6 million of the ELO, that resource 7425. And then there's a restricted to paraprofessionals, that's the 7426. That in essence was, again, state directed. So on social emotional supports, we have a number of items, as you can see here, ranging from social emotional training development and supports, trauma informed care, nonviolent crisis intervention. So in essence, that is to provide training on de-escalation strategies to our staff, counseling supports, given the need that we do anticipate from our students returning, as well as that systems of support, the MTSS, which includes practices such as restorative practices. So there I will pause and ask Dr. Alvarez if she can speak to us about some of the examples of what social-emotional can provide, what are some of the supports we can provide to our students. And so if you can have a brief description of that. Dr. Alvarez.
Good afternoon, Dr. Aguirre, board members, cabinet members, and community. Thank you for having this opportunity for us to discuss our thoughts and collective ideas. Right now with the social emotional, we're really focusing on the collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning. And through that collaborative, we're looking at some critical practices in social emotional learning. And we're looking at, first of all, making sure that we have the ability to cultivate and deepen those relationships and build the partnerships so that we can develop strong SEL programs at each of our sites. We also look at a practice of critical self-care and designing opportunities so that adults can connect, heal, and build their capacity to support students. We're also looking at a third practice, which is really creating those safe, supportive, and equitable learning environments that promote all students' social and emotional development. And the fourth practice is making sure that we have data, we have the power to use data as an opportunity to share, deepen those relationships, and continuously improve our practices to support not only our students, our staff, but also our families. And those are critical. And so through this process, as we began the pandemic, we really worked on developing units of study for our teachers, activities that it would occur on a daily basis for that social emotional learning. So with these critical practices that we have kind of as a foundation, we will continue to grow that, provide training for our staff, and then embed those into our curricular and daily practices.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. And on the MTSS, the multi-tiered systems of support, I'll ask Dr. Moore if he can provide some examples of what those systems of support can look like and what are some of the conceptual items we are currently looking at. Dr. Moore?
Thank you very much, Dr. Aguirre, and also thank you, board, community, and staff. Regarding the multi-tiered systems of support, we're really looking to build on some of the foundational pieces that are in current existence. For example, many of our schools have undergone some extensive training in restorative practices, and that's a term that we've heard a lot about in recent years in an effort to bring more community and effort to address harm and problem solving. But more importantly, we're looking to, again, expand on those efforts and add into some more targeted support at our schools. Restorative practices has been, the investment we've made has been really focused on middle school, and we have some teacher allocations at the middle school level, and we're looking to expand some of those allocations in training and opportunities for the high school level. At some of our high schools, you'll know that we have teen court and other programs, but earlier this week when we met with some of our stakeholder groups, including teachers, counselors, and students, the idea of restorative practices and really pushing that forward came right up to the surface. And so what multi-tiered systems of support are using platforms like restorative practices and other interventions, and ensuring that not only do we have the resources in place to conduct them, but we also have the proper training with our staff. And so what we're looking at is ensuring that at all of our levels, we're able to have identified resources, identified personnel, and identified training for our students to address situations with for our staff to address situations with our students. And I also want to add in that the self-care piece that Dr. Alvarez just brought up is so critical in all of this. And the idea of wellness feeds directly into the multi-tiered systems of support, because also our staff need opportunities to have any situations that they're undergoing addressed as well. And so we look to provide a very robust opportunities for these issues.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. So that encapsulates that area of social-emotional supports. The next area that, as we have identified these themes for supporting our students, is instructional supports. So here we're looking at accelerated models of learning models in English language arts and math. The paraprofessional staff is the 2.6 that was identified, 2.6 million identified by, again, by the state. Tutoring, this can include both in-person or virtual, so that will allow us that flexibility to, again, support our students where they may be. Before and after school supports, these are and this could include enrichment activities as well. We are identifying funding for site allocations to, again, focus on acceleration of learning. So that is, as you may recall, one of the areas that's identified as permissible, according to that CDE website. This is an area, the next one is planning time for purposes of support. So again, with these additional activities, there will be the need to allow for planning to deploy these strategies. The next item, I really do want to take a moment, which is ethnic studies and inclusive curriculum. And we are identifying $5 million for that support because as we had conversations with our students and with our staff, it became readily available or very evident that there's a clear need and desire to receive the instruction that is inclusive, and that our curriculum reflects all of our students and our community. And so part of that feedback process helped to further inform this part of our investment or allocation recommendation. Again, to make sure that we can do this not only this year, but also moving forward in a way that builds capacity and internal efficacy so that we can bring inclusive curriculum and training that would allow us to really have a systemic and system-wide approach. As we have all seen recently, most recent with the Chauvin case, it is a time of racial reckoning, and the ability to support our students and our staff to be able to process the moment we are going through, as well as moving forward to a more diverse community. I think this is a critical component, and that's why I wanted to highlight this investment in ethnic studies. I think it will be critical for our district. The next item, teacher on special assignment. Again, as we're implementing a variety of different items such as ethnic studies and looking at other areas, we will have a need for support to be able to facilitate those implementations. Supports for homeless and foster youth, as you may recall from that CDE slide, that is one of the areas for investments. And limited summer school, this is a $1 million allocation. And again, this is to be kind of braided with other sources of revenue so that we can have a comprehensive approach. And lastly, the technology and internet supports. As you can see, we're going to be making a $12 million investment in technology, because this is part of our preparedness strategy. If, as we learned during COVID, not having or having the need to further acquire devices and hotspots when everybody else was trying to procure them as well created a challenge. And so for us to be able to address the preparedness need, that's why we are making such a strong investment in technology and internet support. So that takes us to the end of this resource. And now we can move on to the ESSER 2 resource, the federal resources. And here I note hand by President Segura. President Segura.
Thank you, Dr. Gaggetti. So my question was, were we going to wait to the end to get board input on these items, or you want to break it up within state and federal? It's just a question. It's up to you. You guys.
We can get through the slides, and we can have the presentation up just to kind of facilitate kind of getting through. That's what I would suggest.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. So then the next resource is the federal ESSER 2. Here we have a little over $34 million. Again, the initial category is instructional supports. So here, again, the maintenance, operations, and continuity of services. This is not to increase the number of staff. This is to maintain the level of staff. So I think that's a critical item to point out, as well as other items in operations and continuity of services. It might be a fine distinction, but a distinction worth making nonetheless. And this would cover the 21-22 and 22-23 fiscal years, and would allow us to be strategic in how we address the current environment that we are with declining enrollment. So the next row is COVID spacing restrictions. On this item, it's important to note that when this was being developed, our spacing restrictions were 6 feet of social distancing. Shortly after that, it was reduced to 3 feet. We are continuing with 6 feet for the duration of this school year. I think there was enough change that had come at the system as a whole. But once we prepare for next school year, I think this is an item that we will be looking at closely to ensure that however we proceed is in alignment with the guidance, revised guidance that we expect to hear from the state on June 15th. So that is something we will continue to monitor. Summer Bridge, the next item is something that it's an item that I think is very much needed, especially from a socio-emotional perspective. This is to bring a Summer Bridge experience to all of our schools so that middle schools can welcome students coming in from elementary schools that have not been in classrooms for a year, as well as welcoming students to a high school that have not been in a classroom for a year. And then that is the primary priority, with the opportunity also to explore opening it up to a broader number of students. Again, it's on availability, but this is something that really goes towards rebuilding and re-engaging students who may have lost an engagement over the summer, over this year. Over the summer we can build some of that connection to their peers as well as to the campus, and so they get to know their teachers, they get to know their administrators, they get to know the campus, quite frankly. So that's the Summer Bridge, and again, it's for us an opportunity to do something a little bit creative, a little bit fun, bring joy back into the education experience, and to start re-engaging our students once again. It has been a long time, as one of the speakers mentioned at the beginning. So that's the Summer Bridge item. The next item is summer school and Intersession transportation for purposes of extended school year. Again, this goes to support students who may have special needs. So that is, again, an area of investment we are going to be recommending. Saturday school enrichment. This is, again, another area where we're looking to ensure that we have programs that appeal to students that would like that makes them kind of, is one of those things that brings joy and really that excitement of coming to school. Is we're looking at that Saturday, not as a traditional kind of Saturday school, but more on an enrichment capacity. The next item is extension of school day and a reading clinic, again, to support our students with their accelerated learning. School psychologists, we will have a need to ensure we continue to focus on assessments and testing. So that's that allocation. And here, the last item under instructional supports is an additional site allocation, and the methodology would be by enrollment as a baseline, and then look at these other areas as well. So that's about $3.8 million investment. The next area of focus is technology internet support. So that's $5 million. Again, we've already shared the importance of technology, especially during this time of distance learning. Systems of support, we are recommending in totality a $3 million investment. As you heard from both Dr. Alvarez and Dr. Moore about us growing the MTSS and restorative practices, as well as trauma-informed care. Coming back from COVID, we all understand there's going to be a lot of trauma we're going to need to process together. And so that's part of that effort. Dr. Salko, if you could scroll a little bit on the COVID preparedness. So that goes to the need for us to coordinate reports and submit reports to multiple agencies, as well as having a COVID coordinator. At this time, our thinking is that perhaps it could include a nurse or nurse on a special assignment type of staff So we're looking at, again, options for us to be able to ensure we're providing timely reporting to the different agencies that we are required to. Next item is PPE. I think that item pretty much speaks for itself. And then safety protocol training for staff, our classified staff, so that they can have an understanding of what is the expectation, how do you appropriately follow safety protocols, especially in coming back, and what are those things that we want to make sure that we're all doing. And next item is nutrition services, with us providing a summer school at every campus. We do anticipate the need for a greater level of service from our nutrition services, so that is part of that allocation, and that gets us to the $34.3 million in that resource. And then the last column, the last resource, and the largest resource as well. So as we mentioned, when we met with our students and a number of our staff associations, they definitely identified the ethnic studies and cultural proficiency as an area of focus. And so I'll ask Dr. Moore to speak about what are some of the possibilities when it comes to funding cultural proficiency and support for our cultural communities, our minority communities. So Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Dr. Aguirre. Really, one of our next steps in this work is, if you think back to the Black Lives Matter update that resolution update that I provided to the board a couple of months back, wherein we talked about establishing empowering groups on our campuses, having culturally relevant opportunities, like students going to conferences, staff participating in training and professional development. These are the types of programs we would like to support in these and other cultural groups that you see listed on the form. For example, in the month of May, we have the Makaisa conference that many of our Filipino administrators and teachers are working on to bring forward for all of our students, and ensuring that we can support that in a very viable way, and support that with materials, and if there's guest speakers and things. And so really the idea would be to make sure that we have opportunities for these empowering groups to exist on our campuses, and training and opportunities for teachers to support them.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. So that would be the kind of what our thinking is regarding cultural proficiency. Then we move on to social emotional supports. This one's specific to therapy services. So this would be to, again, support the ongoing work that our counseling staff conducts. At some point, there's a need for a deeper level of support. So that's what therapy services is envisioned as kind of, again, with multiple layers of support. That would be yet another layer to ensure that we're providing those supports to students who may have that need. And so that would be that item. And we now are at an instructional supports area. So here we are looking at alternative education programs such as Launch Academy and some of our other alternative education programs. That is an example, the Launch Academy, but it could be incorporate the other alternative education programs as well. I just want to make sure I provide clarity on that. There's a summer school item, again, $2 million, so that we can we can implement planning across multiple years to ensure that we are having summer school, and we have secured funding to provide summer school in a comprehensive manner. The next item is instructional materials. And as you may see, we are making a very significant investment in instructional materials of $20 million. While it is very significant, I would like to ask Dr. Alvarez to speak about kind of where we are with the needs for instructional materials in our district, and the need to really update and ensure that those materials and our adoptions, our curriculum adoptions, are up to date. So with that, Dr. Alvarez, would you please elaborate?
Thank you, Dr. Aguirre. As I've shared with the board before, we have had a pretty strong plan for replacement of our instructional materials. We have a 6-year plan that helps support, anywhere from our English textbooks, that many of them are from 1994, to our science and social science textbooks. And as we go through the different curriculum, we made a very heavy investment in our language and our AP courses a few years ago with full adoption in those areas, but we need to continue to do so. And one of the elements with this plan, in looking at both the state funding, the federal funding, our district general fund, our lottery funding, is that we're trying to braid these funds to ensure that with all of these, whether it's the social emotional supports, instructional supports, et cetera, that we are maximizing our dollars to get the largest impact for our students. And so with this $20 million investment, along with the $5 million that we have for the ethnic studies and inclusive curriculum, in addition to the lottery funding and our general fund that we support, we will be able to, over the next 5 years, develop and complete our adoptions for our textbook materials. And so we will be providing the board an updated plan that will start with English language arts to adopt new materials there.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Again, that's part of our overarching kind of comprehensive approach. So then the next item is special services supports. Again, that is definitely an area where this funding is an allowable service and supports. So special services, we are recommending allocation about $5 million. The next item we're calling, it's kind of a broad-based item, which is student engagement and enrichment. And here we're recommending a $6 million investment in areas that are inclusive of athletics, college, career, technical education, CTE, and visual and performing arts. And again, these are as we heard earlier from a band teacher, these are areas these are the reasons why that keep students motivated, and also support with social emotional pieces. It allows us to also provide a comprehensive offering to students, which again, in an environment of declining enrollment, allows us to be in that space of competing with charter schools or private schools to make sure that we offer comprehensive opportunities and enrichment activities for our students. So I think that's another aspect that's critically important, particularly for students who have been disengaged. And so this is an opportunity for us to re-engage our students, our families, our communities, and in a meaningful way. And the next item is the project-based learning seed funding. So again, with our thought process to bring some innovation in terms of how we accelerate learning and providing different types of learning opportunities to our students, what this is intended to be is really allow an opportunity for our school sites to develop proposals for development of project-based learning in a model where it would be seed funding, so that after 2 years, there would be that self-sustainability because enrollment would be built. But again, the goal here is to bring communities, maybe in a community school model. So it would be students, parents, teachers working alongside with administrators and counselors, and really kind of a comprehensive effort. So that is the conceptual framework for this item, again, to allow us to bring this innovative spirit and allow us to also be in that space of innovation. As public schools, we will not cede the innovation space. We have the ability to do that as well. So it's something that we're quite excited about as again a possibility of using this kind of in a almost again to seed the idea, allow it to germinate, and then hopefully it becomes, the goal would be that the plan would over time become the program would become self-sufficient. So that is the goal. And then tutoring as well, making sure, again, virtual or in person. So that's that piece. Then some additional funding identification for technology and internet supports of approximately $7 million. And we bring to, we're kind of coming to the next step, which is the Covet facilities and operation improvements. These are the areas that we are looking to, again, HVAC and roof replacements. These we will continue to monitor. If there's ability to use capital funding, I think that would be a priority. But we also wanted to make sure that we are addressing some of the situations where there's we want to improve the airflow and the air circulation. Also, for purpose of transportation, we've identified 7 small buses and 3 large buses, given the needs for distancing in a bus setting as well. Also, some upgrades to our kitchens, as well as some projects across the district. Similar theory there with the COVID transportation routes, given the fact that there's still evolving guidance on the number of students that can be on a bus. Then maintenance, operations, and custodial, what we have found is with the multitude of activities going on our campuses, there is a need for, again, additional custodial support. And so that's something that we're definitely looking at as a possibility. And then additional staffing and classified professional growth. And that professional growth is in the area of, again, quality customer service, so that we are continue to focus on having a welcoming environment. And then student and family re-engagement activities, that would be us being able to reach out to families who may be in different settings, not necessarily one of our schools, to make sure that we're reaching out and communicating and sharing what programs we have, particularly with this such strong investment, as well as professional development that would be subject to bargaining for $2 million. And so with that, we come to the 76.4 million of this resource. I know we've shared a lot. Again, we try to organize it by a thematic approach and to ensure that we're having a multi-year strategy to deploy these resources. So with that, we conclude this aspect of this portion of the presentation, and we can get into those guiding questions that we had earlier. So with that, the first piece, are there things that you see in there that that are strong that maybe we need to do more of, or areas that would like to see improvement and across the board? And again, it's an open forum, priorities, the whole 9 yards.
Thank you, Dr. Aguirre. I really appreciate, and staff. That was obviously, that's a lot of information, and I would say that's a living document. Yes, that, you know, as we make our way through what the funding that we get or not get, and how we're going to spend it. And I mean, there was a lot of good work done with this document, just trying to capture everything that we need to, you know, capture, and ballpark the monies that we need. There was a lot in it I liked. And you know, and I'll just leave it at that, and we'll just go with, you know, any questions from the board or input, and we'll go to Dr. Arancibia first. Thank you, sir.
No, I'm really impressed, and I want to say thank you for this. This is comprehensive, really comprehensive. My concern is, I'm always lobbying for arts, and since, you know, I'm a product of the arts here, and I really like to see, because I see the arts and sports. It's funny, the things that have helped us mentally prepare to come back to school is those components, right? Where we have sports, we have arts that are helping students kind of be happy about coming back to school. I mean, I had a staff member tell me, I saw the practices happening over at the high school next to my house, and I, you know, got pumped up about it because we're actually heading back. I mean, it made me feel, and then I realized so much of this is a carrot towards coming back, right, for students, and the desire to come back. And I think that, you know, vocational, I think that the sports and the visual and performing arts, I think we have to actually create an avenue where those performances can happen early and often, so students have a rationale and a reason there. And if it means funding more to that, I think that's something we should really consider. Because as we all know, I mean, I'm a performing artist myself. I work with musicians. That's been a death knell to not be able to perform. And so if we can take the appropriate precautions and we're able to fund a little bit more to assure that we do that, we have access to instruments and we have access to instructors that can help us out. I think that's an important step towards helping our students get back and really helping with the socio-emotional, because I think once we have that buy-in, I mean, we see it already with the students that are participating in sports. It almost calms their minds, you know, and you see the fact that that's really helped them transition back into school. So I would really encourage us to consider that. And that's my statement for today.
Thank you, Dr. Arancibia. We'll go to Trustee Student Representative Desiree Damos, but let me just say something, and I first, Desiree, if that's all right. So I concur with Dr. Arancibia. I think, you know, that the enrichment part is very big, and I'm glad that there's a lot of that in this, and because our students really need that. They really need that, and you know, that support, or just that help with their minds, and just to get back into the flow of school. And I know we have school, you know, we have the summer school stuff, and you know, and let me just say on that, you know, and I see it in there, you know, where it's just not, you know, to me would be a mistake just to hammer kids with, you know, testing, homework, just hammer him. You know, you have been out of school for a year, and you need to, you know, we need to test you. We need to, you know, they do need to learn, and you need to catch up on some things. I'm sure some students do. I know I'd be, if I was going through this, I would be that guy, that student who would be struggling really bad, not being able to be in the classroom. That would be me. Not my kids, well, my son maybe so, but my two daughters, they would be on top of it, and they have been. But I just think that's really important that, you know, we have a balance there where we make it so that, you know, the students are you know, there's some, the socio-emotional support is big, and I'm glad there's you know, that's in there. But I just wanted to add that on to what Dr. Arancibia said. And with that, we can go to Student Representative Desiree. Go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. I have a few questions on the presentation. To my knowledge, I know that the U.S. Department of Agriculture, has provided free meals to every student from 2021 to 2022. And we did discuss free and reduced lunch earlier with the budget. And I was wondering how this free and reduced lunch policy was going to be affected by the policy from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and if there's like a change in criteria for those who qualify for free and reduced lunch and things along those lines. And another question that I have is regarding students returning back to person. I understand with the different school sites in our district, there are a lot of disparities in resources in regarding how students can get vaccinated, how their parents can get vaccinated. And regarding funding, I'm sorry if you touched upon this, but I just missed it. But if you could please elaborate on how funding will be distributed differently throughout the school sites in the district, I would also appreciate that, especially with the resources regarding COVID-19 equipment and stuff. And and stuff. And one last thing that I would like to add is I really appreciate the investment in ethnic studies, because that's something that students have kind of been advocating for throughout this school year. And it's a great honor to be a part of a district that emphasizes the importance of inclusivity and student perspective and curriculum. So that's something that I would like to thank you on. And those are the 3 points that I have.
If I may, President Segura?
Please do. Thank you, Desiree.
Yeah, thank you, Desiree. And again, Desiree was actually helped us convene the student advisory committee. So thank you for that as well, Desiree. So on the free and reduced lunch, that question, I want to say it was this week, we received word that the waivers that were there this year have been extended for the next school year. So that will allow us flexibility for a time there. We were not certain if that was going to happen, but this is definitely welcome news. So our nutrition services is in the process of putting planning regarding how the waivers and that flexibility is going to look once we come back in person. But those waivers were extended, so we may have some flexibility. Then the next question about students coming back in person. So while we don't necessarily control the vaccines that are coming through to our community, one thing we're doing, again, very strong is advocating with our multiple municipalities. So, you know, our district covers the city of South San Diego, city of Chula Vista, city of Imperial Beach, city of National City, as well as some unincorporated areas. So we continue to advocate. Right now, the only vaccine that's available for any eligible individual over age of 16 is the Pfizer vaccine. So that is somewhat of a limiting factor because the Moderna is not available for anybody over 16. That's until 18. So what we are doing, as an example, is with Sweetwater High School. We, in working with the city of National City, we identified, or the city set aside 500 vaccines for students at Sweetwater High School, again, those who are over 16. We continue to have that conversation with the city of Imperial Beach, city of Chula Vista, city of San Diego. So we continue to look for ways where our advocacy can make a difference to ensure that our students have access to vaccines in a timely manner. That's a great point, Desiree, and that's definitely been something that we've been doing since the beginning, is that advocacy with the different layers at the state, at the county, at the municipal, the city level. So we continue to do that very fervently to support our students and a healthy and safe return. The next question, I think, was about funding for site level. So if you look at the sheet that's uploaded, it actually includes a methodology. It's by enrollment, as well as some additional add-ons regarding students who are eligible for free and reduced lunches and English learners. So there's a method in place, and that's again a formula that we can look to. So that was the 3 questions that I caught for mine.
Hey, can I say something real quick? Desiree, I'm going to tell you, you didn't have to take this Friday to be over here, and I just want to say thank you for showing up and providing those questions and your input. And that's, to me, the biggest kind of community service a person can give. And I just want to say thank you for participating.
Yes, absolutely, Desiree. That is so true. And as you know, I don't need to say it, but I have always been a big proponent of the ethnic studies, and so is Desiree since day one. I know day one she made that perfectly clear, and I'll never forget that. So I truly appreciate that, and it will help with a lot of things that have happened in our world over the last year. You know, during the pandemic and all the issues that our country and our communities and students and families have been faced with and continue to experience. So we'll go to Arturo, then Frank, then Paula. So go ahead, Arturo.
Thank you, President Segura. So just real quick, just to make sure, do we just start throwing everything out at you, or just talking about strengths right now?
It could be a comprehensive conversation. You can throw it out.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just want to say I concur with my colleagues and Desiree for what she mentioned. With regards to just for clarification, I think just for the public, why was this meeting set for today at 4 p.m.?
Thank you. So the reason it was set for today is because as we're going down the path of developing these priorities, it's really a preliminary conversation of where we are. It's not meant to be the finality, and there's no budget coming up for a vote at this time. We like I said, we started the conversations with our multiple stakeholders this week. So this is the next opportunity. There will be future opportunities as well. And after each opportunity, we debrief. We take stock of where we are. We make adjustments because we want to make sure this document reflects our community, our district, and all of our stakeholders. The reality is when we were faced with a challenging financial time, we came together to identify how we would address it. And now that there's some resources here, I think it's also incumbent on us to make sure that we do this collectively. So that's the rationale for doing this. It's not the only opportunity. It's again part of the starting of a conversation.
That's what I want to hear. Good.
Thank you. So this is not a hard set list, and how are our parents going to be notified so they can give input?
Yes, so I've been having conversations with Dr. Alvarez around that. Dr. Alvarez, would you like sharing some of the our next steps from engaging our parents?
Good afternoon again. So as was described in the earlier description, we are going to do several types of forums. Of course, we always go through our DLAC and DPAC Those are two of our standard committees that we vet everything through. We also are developing, in conjunction with the LCAP and the Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant, a survey that will go district-wide, and that will include our parents, our students, our staff, and our community members. So that will be available. And then we're also planning on taking it to the school sites. So through the school site council, through their own ELAC, and through the principal's coffee, they will have the conversation so that we can get input through various stages and not just have one input meeting. And then we'll continue to reach out to our stakeholders to have conversations. As we do these iterations, each time we've met with the group, there's been something added or expanded, or something that's specific. For example, with the enrichment opportunities, that came out of a discussion with our partners, our educational partners. It's like, we really need to get our students happy to be back. Yep. And so we keep on modifying and changing based on the feedback. So as Dr. Aguirre said, this isn't the ultimate document. This is a document in progress, and we're trying to ensure that we really get that valued stakeholder feedback.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Dr. Aguirre, I wanted to thank you for mentioning the community service, community service part of the work that we do, because I know, we've all been affected by the pandemic, and a lot of our students and parents don't need that negative or that frustration or whatnot. So I appreciate you emphasizing that customer service part, because we just got to do what we can to help the students out and the parents out, and not give them an extra frustration to what's going to come up during the school time and anything that they need in school. So thank you for mentioning that. I really appreciate that. With regards to the money for internet technology and instructional materials, are we also looking at purchasing digital books now that we're looking at making sure that all our students have a device and have internet access? Are we looking at digital books as well?
Thank you, Trustee Solis. That is an area that we are looking at. I'll ask Dr. Alvarez, since there is an Instructional Materials Committee that does convene. What has if she can kind of elaborate on the conversations about potential for using digital curricula. So, Dr. Alvarez?
Definitely, there's probably there are two avenues that we look at when we look at digital curriculum. One is one that we've discussed before, which is the open educational resources. And many districts have used those as vetted resources for online learning. For example, Grossmont Unified or Union High School District created their biology curriculum through an open ed resource model. With that, they spent a lot of time vetting it, creating committees, doing an adoption committee, and using those resources. The second model is one that we already have in place. For every textbook that we buy, there is a digital resource that goes with that, and our textbooks have those. It's much more economical to actually purchase those licenses. That is one of the reasons that we were able to transition in one respect in a more smooth fashion, because we already had those digital resources. The other benefit of that is that those digital resources also have companion and supports in Spanish. So it helps our students who are English learners. So we will be looking at those resources. And then we also approved just recently Overdrive, which is an online digital resource for library materials. And so that is another aspect of not necessarily curriculum, but supplemental resources that are online and digital.
Vice President Solis, you still there?
Yeah, I can hear you. I had to turn off my camera because my internet. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes. Go ahead. You can
okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Dr. Alvarez. Yeah. With regards to project-based learning, are the seed funding part of it? Are we also going to include students and coming up with different proposals to get them engaged in this process?
Thank you, Trustee Solis. So as Dr. Winters and I have been having these conversations, definitely wanted to make it a comprehensive group of stakeholders from a campus to include students, to include parents, in addition to teachers, administrators, counselors. So it would be a well-rounded effort. At this point, this is in conceptual manner, but as we develop this further to put together kind of those outlines of those contours of what a proposal would need to include, that's definitely part of the process.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And with Summer Bridge, I attended Summer Bridge at UCSD when I first attended there. And one thing that they had there was culture fairs. So they brought in different like dancing groups, different groups like from different ethnic dances and whatnot. And we were able to learn about different groups like that. And I think just gives students a better understanding of other people that they're at school with, but they get to know more about where they come from. So I think if that would be possible to have like a culture fair or some along those lines, like different types of foods and the dancing and just different aspects with regards to other ethnic groups. And the Launch Academy, I have received a lot of inquiries from parents asking if we can continue having their students stay at home. And one thing I have been telling them is that we are going to continue the Launch Academy, where they can stay at home and do what they do their studies at home, but they could still have that the participation in like band and sports and other on-site benefits from their school of residence. Are we looking at expanding that more?
So thank you, Trustee Solis. As a matter of fact, something that we are bringing forward on Monday is an approval for the district to seek what's known as a county district school, a CDS code for the Launch Academy. So it would in essence become its own standalone program. So we are looking to, again, with the understanding that there's likely a significant interest in remaining in virtual learning, we are looking to grow that. I'll ask Dr. Winters if he would elaborate on kind of where we are with Launch and some thoughts about growing the program. Dr. Winters.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Our intention is to allow the program to expand based on interest. We've begun recruiting students we did a direct campaign to those who've left us over the past 12 months, got a few to come back or show interest in coming back. And we're going to begin next week to directly recruit those who are both incoming students, so they know that option's available, and any student existing, so they know that as we've signaled tonight, move to possibly 5-day in person, the option for those who are still interested in it will be available.
Excellent. And finally, my last one, with regards to tutoring, I know there's going to be a need for tutoring across the county. So I know the need for tutors is going to be a tough one. But I was just thinking, if we can reach out to like San Diego State, UCSD, USD, Point Loma Nazarene, for those students or teaching credential programs to see if we can get some of those students to come and help tutor. So whether online or in person.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something we've definitely observed right now, kind of coming out of COVID, the fact that actually there's a shortage of employees in a number of different industries. So we can definitely reach out to our partners at the different universities and community colleges. So that's something we can have in mind.
Excellent. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice President Solis. We move to Trustee Tarantino. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, President Segura. Again, I echo my colleagues' comments about the comprehensiveness of this report and all of the oversight and time and planning that went into presenting all of the information in one place so we can find it. So thank you very much for that. It was excellent and very well done. And I have a question, and I don't know. I've not heard anything about adult ed, and not only from our district, but I mean, all of the money that's coming down from the state and the feds, unless I missed it, where is adult ed in all of this?
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Tarantino. That I believe that is something that we would need to explore further for eligibility purposes. As you saw, the listing out of that list of CDE in terms of allowable services and support, that was not necessarily something that was identified. That does not mean that it is not allowable, but I think we do need to do additional due diligence and follow up on that. I will ask Dr. Salkeld if she can elaborate further. But again, based on the resources that are available on CDE's website, it's not something that's necessarily identified. Dr. Salkeld, can you elaborate?
Correct. A lot of the basis of the funding, I think as Dr. Geary mentioned during the presentations, based on like Title I methodology, which is the ESSER 2 and the ESSER 3. So it does not factor in the students at the adult school program. And then also similar with the state monies, again, that was driven off of our student enrollment in 712. But it is an area where you can certainly follow up on that. I think we received similar inquiries with the CARES Act monies. And so we'll follow up, but primarily it seems to be at this point for our students in 712.
No, that's what I said. I don't know if I missed something that, coming down from the state or the feds. I've not heard anything about adult education, but definitely the adult learners have the same issues that our 712 learners do, and so do their faculty. So that was just something that I was wondering. So thank you for that, both Dr. Geary and Dr. Salkeld. Under the state in-person instruction grant, you're mentioning Intersession, and you're mentioning 3 Intersessions. And heretofore, the Intersessions that we've had are basically in the fall and in the spring, because in the winter, there's the holidays, and a lot of students are traveling, families are traveling, and as things open up, I don't know how viable a winter intersession might be. Just something to think about. Like I said, heretofore, we've always had fall and spring intersessions and not the winter. And are these intersessions going to be in-person and hybrid?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question, Trustee Tarantino. We're actually planning for to be able to offer both experiences, in person and hybrid, but or distance learning, but not in a hybrid format. So students will have the ability to select an in-person experience or a distance learning experience. And so, Dr. Alvarez, would you mind? Is there anything that you would like to add in that regards?
I think you covered it. Offering the 3 sessions, and in particular in the January, we would do the for example, for this year would have been the week of the 4th and the week of the 11th. That would have been the 2 weeks. So we wouldn't do a full intersession like may have happened in the past where it was 4 to 6 weeks. It's only 2 weeks. And it really is to help students accelerate. For many of our students, in particular with those with NCPs, they might not need to repeat the entire course, but they may need certain elements to master the course and meet the competencies. And so those are some of the skills and competencies that we're identifying so that we can help students accelerate learning. And let me just define, there was a comment before that we don't see any information there on learning loss mitigation. We really are now focused on accelerated learning. Instead of that negative connotation, it's where are students now and how can we build that bridge and that gap so that they can move forward.
Great. I think it's better to concentrate on the positive rather than the deficit. And so I appreciate that. So
yeah, our students have learned a lot through this pandemic and have experienced a lot. And so bringing that into what happens in the classroom is important.
So another question about the intersession. Would a student have, if a student, say in terms of the no mark pandemic, COVID pandemic, if they met the requirements within the first week, would they have to still continue attending the second week?
No, they would not.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's appropriate. And if a student like only needs, like you said, to master a few skills and they get it done within the first week, why should they hang around just sitting there for the second week? So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. In terms of the state expanded learning opportunities grant, I appreciate the fact that wellness is the focus. And the socio-emotional supports are paramount. And I also agree with my colleagues in terms of the ethnic studies and the important role that ethnic studies will play in all of this. So thank you for that. In terms of the federal ESSER number 2, the summer bridge. Dr. Aguirre, I appreciate the fact that you mentioned that it may be expanded to all grade levels rather than our incoming 7th graders and incoming 9th graders, because in an effort to attract more students, I think that, there's a lot of students who may be coming to us in grades 10, 11, and 12 who have not been on a campus, not only for a year because of COVID, but they may be new to the district. And so I appreciated the fact that, you're considering something that has to deal with other grade levels. In conjunction with that, new students coming to the district have parents that are new to the district as well. And so they may need some kind of orientation in terms of, what's going on in our schools and programs that are available and the resources that we offer, not only academic resources, but also socio-emotional resources. And if we can maybe squeeze in something for new parents, and I really like what Vice President Solis said in terms of providing some kinds of cultural enrichment events at all of these functions. I think that's an excellent way. Always attract people with food and performances. So that's a good thing. So thank you for at least considering those kinds of activities. In terms of the ESSER 3s, let's see. I really like the fact that we're considering the empowering the various groups through the cultural events that each group is performing, and so that's a good thing. In terms of instructional materials, I've been lobbied by middle school science teachers that their textbooks are 14 years old and they don't even address the standards. And so as we look, I know that Dr. Alvarez, you mentioned that language arts is the first, English language arts is the #1 priority, but maybe if we could do something with the middle school science, that might, again, I've been told, I don't know, I've been told that the books are 14 years old, and I can imagine what they look like, first of all. So just something to think about in terms of that. In terms of the alt ed programs, in the ESSER #3, will we have access to the alt ed committee report? I know that they've been meeting and they're supposed to come up with the report and make some recommendations. Will we have that report available to us sometime before we have to make final decisions on the budget?
So thank you, Trustee Tarantino. I want to make sure that everybody knows there is not a report right now. The meetings are ongoing.
I know, but we still have time. We still have time. I'd like, before I make any decisions in terms of the next steps for alt ed, I'd like to see what their report says and also some of the recommendations that they're making.
Yeah,
that was all.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Tarantino. I'll ask Dr. Moore, who's been heading up that work, if we can elaborate on the work that's been going on with the Alternative Education Committee. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, and thank you, Trustee Tarantino. Yes, the ALTED committee, I think we've met up to seven times with a great group of teachers, counselors, administrators to discuss all things ALTED, including our schools like East Hills Academy and Alta Vista Academy, Life School, as well as Palomar and Independent Study and Home Hospital. I mean, the conversation has been very rich and robust, as well as our learning centers and the transition of learning centers from on all campuses to learning centers at 3 campuses this year. We're very much looking forward to it. We have one more meeting scheduled next week where we will be presenting some of the recommendations and solidifying some of the final pieces of the work. And so in early May, we look to have a report that we can provide to the board and others.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Moore. I appreciate that. And in terms of special ed supports, will the supports be based on? I remember that there was a special ed program audit that was conducted, and we only saw the draft. I don't know that we've ever seen the final report. My question is, will the recommendations and the supports be based on that audit? And if so, can we see what the final audit was? Because I don't believe, I could be mistaken, but I think we just saw a draft and not the final.
So thank you, Trustee Tarantino. I see that Ms. Storm Gonzalez is here, so I'll ask her to elaborate. Okay. I know she's been having conversations around that particular study and or audit. Michelle, can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure, thank you, Trustee Tarantino. So yes, we have been looking at that audit and their recommendations along with a interdisciplinary team through special education. And what we've done is kind of seen where we have information that can be corroborated with what we are seeing throughout the district. And then there might be some information that we aren't still necessarily seeing within the district. So those findings are going to be presented here to the board, I believe, forthcoming. Okay. In addition, we are looking at having a task force formed, a multidisciplinary task force that will also then, after those recommendations are given, we'll be able to meet, discuss, looking at data current in our district, in other districts with similar demographics, looking at recommendations throughout the state and federal, moving forward for students with disabilities, and be able to have some findings and then further recommendations.
Great. Thank you for that comprehensive overview and good work. Thank you. I appreciate that. Absolutely. And my last comment is about next steps. And if I've done this correctly, we have 3 meetings before we have to approve the budget on the 28th of June. And I don't know, I think this is very important. And this is just from my point of view, I wouldn't mind having standalone meetings or special meetings or workshops to further discuss the budget rather than trying to combine it in a regular meeting. I'm just saying that's something that I would be willing to look at. Okay, and that's it. Thank you again, all of you who helped put your heads together to make this a very, very informative and important document. That's all I have, President Segura. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee. I appreciate all those questions. Let's move to Trustee Hall.
Thank you, President Segura. And I want to thank Dr. Aguirre for leading this work, and all your staff. You know, all the cabinet members have done a tremendous work engaging with their peers and, you know, all the different pieces of our educational entity. I think it's wonderful that you're mapping out this plan. I know that it's a living plan, and I think we can't stress that enough, that there will be adjustments along the way. And as we make those as we move forward and some of those things occur, I would like to see a report brought back in a similar format, but with an alignment of the budget when it's realigned, showing where we are here, what's it been realigned, and what are the expenditures as they occur. Like in, you know, I think that should be a regular standing report. Okay, so we said we were going to do this. We've made an adjustment here to this budget because, and here's where we actually have expenditures to date. And we have this much money left over, and we feel, and we see that it's going in this direction. I think that's key. I appreciate the fact that you have been already engaging in some of this work and, you know, reaching out to our, all the different units that represent, you know, including the DLAC and the DPAC, who are elected to represent those parents from those schools. So I think those are elected to go and do that work. And it's about this time where they've been through training, you know, since they started at the beginning of the year. They're training in those meetings for those parents on all the different aspects of the governance role and the budgets and all the different funding types and what they mean, so that by this point in time, they really have had input, I would expect, and been able to really review and be part of the LCAP process, so that it isn't just a one-time deal at the end of the year, but they're being kind of engaged throughout the year in that work and providing some indication to staff of where they see the needs for that support to go and what they envision for their students. So I think that's key. I think it's great that Desiree and her has really pulled together some good advocacy with her student group. So I want to give everybody a big, because keep in mind, it was just a little over 1 year ago when everything shut down. It was like we were called, in my own experience, we were called into a meeting at my work at noon. It was like nobody knew what was going on. We were called down, all staff, into a meeting, pack up your stuff, get a laptop, check it out, you're going home and you're not coming back. Maybe by the end of April, you'll be coming back. So we, you know, that was last year. This administration, every educator, every classified in our district has been working non-stop to feed families, to pivot from in-person learning to digital learning, to getting devices in the hands of our students, and to be able to reach out to parents. And some of them have been very hard to reach. And that is not the fault of the school or the staff. It is just the reality we're working with. So I can't express enough how proud I am of every member of this district and the work they do every day. And so often all they hear are the negative slams that we see from a few that get a lot of, they have a loud megaphone, but they're really not what's happening. And I know that everyone, when I've had a parent reach out to me saying, I can't get this information, I reach out to Dr. Aguirre. Within 24 hours, the school has gone back to that person, worked with that person, assured them. They reach back out to me. That parent comes back to me and says, oh, thank you, because I do understand now. I feel so much better because I understand my child will be safe. That's where we're at. We want safety. We want assurance of the safety, and we want assurance that our students will be well served. And I think in spite of what you might hear from the loud megaphones, the good work is going on and students are being served. And yes, it has been very difficult, but I know that we're doing the best work possible under the circumstances, and things are going to get better. We are looking forward to a new reality in the coming year, and that's wonderful to know. I think it's very, that you have made a commitment at this time. You believe that we will be able to return fully in person in the fall. And I think that's what I hear a lot of parents asking right now. So I thank you for that. I thank you for the work, where you've done it. I know that all of these are priorities in their own right. You know what I mean? We need to transport kids safely to school. We need to make sure that we have the equipment to cook all these meals that we've been distributing for the last year. And that they're, you know, things aren't worn out, that we can transport those meals when they need to be transported and distributed them safely. All that is really good work. We, you know, I'm very proud of the efforts around the Launch Academy. Dr. Winter, you've done wonderful work there, and your staff. Just really appreciate that. And I know there are so many things, you know, that we want to do, but we really can't do with, you know, we can't do it for long-term without long-term funds. And a lot of these funds are one-time funds. So I appreciate that you've really put the time in and the thought to say, these are one-time funds. We can use them on some of these personnel costs, that we can bring in some extra help. We can do all, you know, some temporary help, whatever, that are working for our district, not just contracting out services. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank Mr. Tarantino, because you stole some of my questions. You didn't really steal them. You just had them because we think on the same level. I was going to ask about adult ed, only because I really do appreciate that we are not just a K-12 district. We are a K beyond, right? Because we have such a robust and strong adult program. And I know that we've been advocating with state legislative officials. I know Assemblywoman Gonzalez, Lorena Gonzalez, actually understands the challenges, and more than one legislator, when we met over this past few months, has expressed their concern about when everything reopens because of all the loss for workers, especially so many of our, you know, workers like the service industry and other things where total shutdowns have meant people have been out of jobs. So I know that there's a need for retraining, for re-equipping people for new jobs and all that. So we'll continue our advocacy, and I would urge our, you know, fellow board members to do as well whenever you have the opportunity. I know that Mr. Segura and Mr. Solis are both our delegates for our California School Boards Association. So I would definitely push that, because every school district in this state does not have the same kind of need when it comes to adult ed. So it's a conversation that really is, for a few of our districts in this state, it really is crucial. And I think we just have to keep really being a robust conversation and knocking on that door in Sacramento about it. Otherwise, it will, you know, those things will not, their needs will not be met, and it will ultimately hurt the families in our community. So I want to say that was really great. The other thing I think you brought up, Mr. Tarantino, is about all this, the different grade levels coming back during that bridging session. I think that's really great, because we want to give them some experiences that they will feel comfortable with, that maybe they missed out on the year, but here I can connect again. I am going to connect with and see who's who. And really, the more we can engage students in that way as just an activity of get to know us, really get to know us is great. And the parents getting them that opportunity as well, because I know that there's a large segment of our parent groups that really have historically really needed help enrolling their students every year, because they couldn't get the sign on right and they couldn't get in there and do this right. And so they would come into the parent centers at their school, and those liaisons would help them do that work with their, you know, right there on a computer in that parent center. So I think whatever we can do to help give parents a little introduction. Not only that, but kind of, I know that sometimes it's referred to as a genius bar, where they have like the techies that work, or the kids that are really good at doing all this, kind of training their peers with it. And I've always thought of it being like when you're at the airport and then you stand on one of those things to plug in your computer while you're waiting, and you're drinking your coffee from the snack bar over there and charging your, you know, I've always thought of it like that with the Genius Bar, that there's some kind of like high level table where parents can walk up and the kids can train them, or a parent liaison or somebody that really knows how to work Canvas and how do I find my kids' grades? They say I can monitor my student. How do I do that? Really walk them through those tools on that bridging week, so parents are. And I know that when we talked during agenda review, Mr. Tarantino thought having that at night would be really good for the parents that work all day. I think in my experience, that's true. For me, I would have always liked it at night because I used to work all day. But when I was in the DPAC, back then it was the District Advisory Council, it was a lot of those parents were only able to come during the day, which is one reason why Southwest High would hold the parent, like a special, come get your child's progress report and hand out all this. They had like a big parent meeting and they'd have like 300 people come to that meeting because it was in the morning. So I think maybe one of that. And I know that's a lot because you got to have staff there and staff's probably already like spread out really thin, but I think that would be very, very key for helping our students go along the way. I really like the fact that you have a lot of mental health supports. Aren't the mental health technicians, aren't they classified employees? Are they? They are, I believe, right? So there are some classified supports key in there. And I think, I noticed that we have a 10% requirement for the expanded learning opportunity for paraprofessional staff. Would that be kind of also, like in the classroom instructional assistants, those kinds of things, instructional aides and other, who else might be in that group?
Yeah, that is kind of where that is focused. And I think it's important to point out that as this directive or legislation was crafted, there was a set of priorities that I think is important to share. So one is, if any paraprofessionals were lost their employment, the focus is to reemploy. And if again, that is the kind of the primary focus of the legislation. I know there's been other questions, but I want to make sure it's really clear that is our directive. Okay. So that is the kind of the first priority, and then also at that point, if there's the possibility of supporting other paraprofessionals as well. So just want to make sure that we're clear on what we are working with.
Right, that's correct. And I'm glad that they have that in there for our paraprofessionals, because not just paras, but classified they are key. They are key to a well-functioning district. And sometimes they're the main contact for some students, they're the one that is trusted because they see them every day. They greet them as they come in. I think that's really important to recognize. And I'm very, very glad about the ethnic studies. I know Mr. Segura, we've all been advocating for that for a number of years. And I'm glad that the state finally recognized and passed, the curriculum. And I know we have a lot of great teachers that are ready to really offer their expertise in how to run that program and how to really push it out. So I know Dr. Moore is being enriched by those conversations, even though, he probably already understands it in many ways more than anybody. So I really appreciate that work. I just want to say there's so much in here that I really think is good. And I know that you've done the work. I know that we've had discussions around this funding, especially the federal and the early funding that came in at our audit finance subcommittee meetings. We've had it at our board meetings. We've approved along the way expending certain things in certain ways, either on equipment, on technology, on devices for students. We've been doing it all along. So I think this is a really clear way to come, like Mr. Tarantino said, one place for a lot of information. But we have been doing it. We have been informing, you've been talking to us about it for a long time throughout the year. And to me, there is no issue around transparency. for everything that's going on, for all the work you've done. I don't know when you guys sleep. That's my, I don't know when you finally take a break and really rest and are able to eat dinner or lunch, because this is so much. Every one of your staff members have done tremendous work. And I just want to say thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. I do just want to make note of how extraordinarily hardworking. This is a great group of leaders we have in our district, and if we're going to go through a pandemic, I think there's no other group that could do this. We are working tirelessly. We're working strategically. We're working transparently. We're working collaboratively, and probably just about any other word that ends with an ly. But we are really trying to, and because this is important work to support our students, to support our staff, to support our community. And so I really appreciate that. And I think I hope our whole team, our staff, heard this, because this is really important. That sometimes it can feel a little bit thankless, but we do work tirelessly on behalf of our students, our staff, our community, because it's a unique time that none of us have ever lived through, and we're trying to do this together, because it's the only way we're really gonna find our way. And so I just wanted to make a note of that, since you did touch on that. This is a great team that we have, and the work that we all do is tirelessly and very focused and strategic. So thank you, Trustee Hall.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. I echo those sentiments 100%. And it made me think about, and the board does, all the board does, members as well. And it made me think about, we're going to offer all of these, summer sessions, maybe winter sessions and spring sessions, but at some point, the educators, you need to rest. That just, it's just been, as Mr. Tarantino pointed out, it just hasn't stopped since, this all went down, and it's, as we all know, not only is it, where everybody had to transition to distance learning, but, and that was just a giant task, but now to go back and there's, it's just so much work that, and then being married to an educator, I see that, you just need a break at some point, and everybody's definitely earned it and then some. But with that, is there any further comments from any other board members? And I'm not seeing any. This was just informational only, so I will now say this special board meeting is now adjourned, and everybody enjoy their weekend. We'll see you Monday evening.